Okay, so everyone coming in, taking a seat. Some people dawdling. Still waiting. All right, welcome. All right, we all have good weekends. Yeah, it's kind of. Okay, so, got some sickies. That's okay. We're still gonna have a good time. Okay, so, welcome. Hands up, catch up. What did we do last lesson? Who can tell me? Yes.
The narrative structure of Midsummer Night's Dream.
Exactly. So we went through and we just carefully talked about each section. Okay, so we've watched the movie and we've listened to a fair portion of the play as well, but we went through the structure. Good. Okay, so we did some flipped learning. You guys remember what flipped learning is? And I had you guys watch a clip. What was that clip?
Kath and Kim.
Yes, Kath and Kim. Kath and Kim. Oh no, I'm actually tired. Kath and Kim. So I know it's early. I know it's early on a Monday, but we can do this. Okay, so Kath and Kim clip. Any idea why I got you guys to watch that?
Because it's very similar to Midsummer Night's Dream.
I think it might be. So that's why we've watched that, and more reasons will come to light. But I'm glad. How many of you watched it? All right, that is everyone in the class.
Everyone.
So that's great.
All of us watched it.
We all watched it. Okay, so okay, so I'm glad. Sorry, I've got the giggles. Even teachers get the giggles. Okay, so we have all watched it, which is excellent because it's going to play a huge part in how we talk about the content of this lesson. So, what we're going to do today, phones down. Okay, what we're going to do today is talk about humour. Okay, humorous techniques. We're not just going to say, oh, that bit was funny. We're going to talk about specifically what is funny in a certain text, how it's funny, and why the author or playwright has used that technique. Okay, we're talking about that today because in this module that you're studying A Midsummer Night's Dream, Module B, close study of the text. Okay? Your HSC assessment outcomes require you in this module to know the distinctive qualities of your text. Now that sounds really broad, but you guys know what that means. It's the parts of the text that really define it, that make it up. So one of the distinctive qualities of A Midsummer Night's Dream is that it's funny. Okay, it is the lightest and one of the funniest of Shakespeare's plays. So humour is a defining quality, a distinctive quality, and we need to understand how it functions in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And we should be able to describe how and why. So we've got these specific terms, describe, explain. Okay, we've done these a million times before. Okay, describe how and why it's funny by referring to actual techniques. As always, we need to provide a statement and we need to give evidence and effect and meaning. Okay, we've given you the acronyms to do that. So, we're going to talk about some humorous techniques, some very specific ones. Okay, I have carefully chosen them. Okay, so we would have covered these before, but we're doing a refresher so that we can talk a bit more about A Midsummer Night's Dream and compare it to another text like Kath and Kim to help us understand. Okay, so malapropism. Can anyone read out? Yes. Who wants to read out? Yes, Tom.
The mistaken use of one word where a similar sounding one is correct. Awesome.
Okay, so can anyone give me an example of when a malapropism is being used?
In the Kath and Kim video?
Yeah.
Brett said that he was the hair. The sole hair rather than air.
So saying I'm the sole, that was in the clip that we watched. So Brett saying I'm the sole hair instead of I'm the sole air. It's inexplicable why something that is that small of a change is funny, but it just is. Okay, and that's what a malapropism is. It is a humorous, mistaken use of one word, and it always makes us laugh. And we will get more into it later, but for now we're just very quickly covering these different techniques. Okay, dramatic irony. So irony we've talked about before, and we've touched on dramatic irony in some of the texts that we've done. But I'd like someone to read this out. Again, I know you guys know it, but we're getting a refresher here so we can have some good discussion. Yes?
When the audience knows more about a narrative situation than the character within it.
Yes, okay, so it's kind of, when we have a character that is ridiculous and they don't know they're ridiculous, but we do, okay? So the audience knows more than the character. The character's in the story. They're not aware of the events that might be coming or, of what other people think of them, but we do. That's the dramatic irony. So it can be kind of cast across a whole book where we know, for example, in romantic stories, how the lovers are going to end. Romeo and Juliet, dramatic irony. We know all the way through that all their machinations, all the things they do to try and be together, are not going to work because they both die. Okay, which is unfortunate, horrible tragedy. Okay, but that is the nature of dramatic ironies, that we know more than the characters. And that can be used, and we'll talk about how it can be used, to create humour. So it's not just for heavy things, like the fate of characters. It's humorous things. It's funny. They have no idea, but we do. Okay, I'm not even going to give you guys the definition for puns and wordplay. I'm going to get it off you.
When one word sounds like another?
Yeah, and which one is that?
Puns.
Puns. So, wordplay. Is wordplay the same as a pun? No?
Is a pun is a type of wordplay?
Yes, exactly. So, I've deliberately put them up there because you guys really actually, in your assessments, really showed me that you had a strong understanding of your literary techniques. And so, I'm testing you guys occasionally. I'm going to challenge you because you're completely up there, and the HSC is going to challenge you. So I'm going to throw in things like this that are kind of just like trick questions, and I can see you guys don't miss a trick. So yes, wordplay is a coverall term for things like puns, okay? Things like malapropisms. It's the use of words. You're literally playing with words to create a certain effect. Playing around with what they look like, with what they sound like, with what they mean. Okay. Now, what we actually need to do, before we start talking about the ways that we find humorous techniques used in Kath and Kim and A Midsummer Night's Dream, before we talk about those things, let's actually think. Let's have some core conceptual thinking going on here, because the HSC is not the same as some of your other exams. They want in your assessments, you need to show you are having core conceptual thinking in the way that you're writing. They need to see that you are going beyond the surface level analysis, that you're going down to the greater purpose in your texts, the greater purpose behind why your playwright, why your composer is doing something. Okay, so we need to go deeper in our thinking and ask these questions that are more complex, okay? And your assessment that's coming up, the analysis between A Midsummer Night's Dream and a chosen text, okay, is going to talk about these deeper questions. It's going to ask you to do conceptual analysis. It's going to ask you to do conceptual comparison. And so part of the reason we're doing this today, comparing Kath and Kim with A Midsummer Night's Dream, is to prepare you for this assessment, okay? That will probably be released next week. Okay, so let's ask the question. Why do playwrights and authors use comedy in their texts? Okay, so have a think. It's not the knee-jerk answer that you think it is. So have a think. Why do we think?
To make us more engaged with the text.
Yes, okay, make us more engaged. How does humour as a technique engage a reader in a text?
It causes you to be more involved with the storyline.
Yes, and why do we think that humour causes us to be more involved?
Because when we laugh, we become kind of closer to all the characters because we're laughing either with or at them.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes us laugh. So that's the surface answer. Okay, comedy makes the reader laugh. It's humorous. Okay, but what we actually want, what we actually want is answers like that, okay? Humor, humorous techniques, wordplay, malapropism, okay, dramatic irony, and a secret one that we'll talk about later. Ooh, secret. Bring the reader. Position. Remember we talked about positioning last week. Position the reader closer to the text. Humor draws you in. It immerses you, bonds you with the characters, okay? It bonds you into the story because that is the nature of humor. It breaks down your walls, okay? And it makes you laugh. But that's your, you know, your band 4 responses. It's funny, it entertains, okay? But your band 5 response and your band 6 responses, I don't know why I'm going down, band 5 and 6 responses are going to be people that explain the core conceptual reasoning. Conceptual reasoning, the composer's reasoning behind using certain things. So, is there another use of humour? A deeper, a greater purpose behind using humour in a text?
It allows you to make complex points easily and simply.
That's awesome. Did everyone hear that? That's so good. Say that again. Can you expand on it?
It allows you to make complex points in a way that's really easy to understand and communicate.
Awesome, awesome. So, humour can make points that are quite complex and quite deep, okay? So remember how we talked about didactic texts last week, okay? Didactic texts are what? 10 points to Gryffindor if you guys can remember. Didactic texts are making a very specific point, okay? Didactic texts seek to convey a moral or a very specific message. That's the purpose of it, okay? That's why the text is there. And sometimes they can be too heavy-handed and readers can go, nope, and they can move further away from the text, and that is the risk of didactic texts as opposed to texts that use more subtle techniques like humour to get a message across. So what Thomas said is that they're using humour to get these complex points across in a subtle way, in a clear, accessible way. And that's why we use techniques. That's why Shakespeare used techniques, okay, like that. He didn't want to hit people around the head with the points he was trying to make. He had a variety of people who were his audience. He had the aristocracy, then he had the working class. He had to speak to both. Okay, so what we're going to do now is very quickly. So, can anyone tell me what this is?
It's a Venn diagram.
Venn diagram, okay. And why do we think we're using a Venn diagram in English?
To compare the two texts.
Yes, awesome. To compare the two texts. So, it's important, okay, as teachers, we're all trying to incorporate your literacy and your numeracy across all the subjects, okay? Your STEM subjects are working in literacy. Your art subjects, English, visual arts, are trying to use numeracy skills as well, because once you guys leave, your literacy and numeracy skills are going to need to be applied in a whole lot of contexts. Okay, so that's why we're using things like Venn diagrams in English, so you can stretch your mind, use those skills. Okay, so Kath and Kim, MSND, Midsummer Night's Dream, or both, okay? So think about the clip that we watched. Okay, you watched that online. We used ICT skills. Okay, we're using them now while we're filling this in. Okay, so think about the techniques that we were just talking about. Do we think that we see them? Those, I'm going to trust on your memories just to remember it. I'm not going to remind you. Think about the techniques we just used and how they might be reflected in Kath and Kim. How they might be reflected in A Midsummer Night's Dream. So being able to compare texts in your mind is really going to get your brain working to make those connections. Okay, being able to compare how two texts work, how they're similar and dissimilar, helps your understanding of both. Okay, these textual comparisons. So have a think, and I'd love to hear some examples. And then once I hear them from you guys, we can decide, are they in both? Or are they in one? Or are they in the other? Okay, so let's hear it.
Malapropism is in both?
Yes, malapropism. Okay, so why would you say that malapropism is in both?
Because
Let's hear the examples.
because Bottom says that he's, I can't remember exactly the scene, but he says that he's an ass.
Yeah.
When he's a donkey.
Okay, yep.
And Brett says it about having the power of eternity.
Yeah, so malapropism. So we've got uses of that in both. So Brett saying, I think it was Kath actually, but Kath saying, so Brett, you've got the power of eternity. Okay, meant to be power of eternity. And that's in Kath and Kim. And you're totally right. I think what you're referencing is the scene in A Midsummer Night's Dream where Bottom says, you're making an ass out of me.
Yeah.
Okay? That's actually, you've kind of got double points because that's not actually malapropism, that's a pun, but you've identified another one that's in the middle here, so well done. So pun, okay, is Bottom. You make an ass out of me. But quickly, let's make sure we cover malapropism. So Bottom, okay, uses it. So if we say it's in Kath and Kim, so we've identified a malapropism, power of eternity, in Kath and Kim. And does Bottom use malapropism? He's quite well known for malapropism, actually. I'll give that away. Can we think of an example of one that he used?
No, I can't.
So off the top of my head, I remember instead of saying odours sweet, okay, this is talking about Pyramus and Thisbe, he says odious instead of odours sweet, okay, and he's saying, instead of saying sweet fragrances, he's saying stinky smells. And so that's the humour that would have very much entertained both the aristocracy and the working class. Malapropisms, using a word that sounds similar in place of the right one. Okay, so that's good. It is in both. Okay, and pun. Bottom, you make an ass out of me. So he's come back in after his head has been turned into that of a donkey. And he doesn't realise. And he just thinks that all the mechanicals are running away to make fun of him, to make an ass out of him. But that is a pun that's been used. Do we see any puns in Kath and Kim? Or do we think maybe that's just A Midsummer Night's Dream?
Yeah, they, I can't remember in Kath and Kim that it is used.
No, that's good. It's good.
Yeah, I can't remember.
No, that's all right. I think that the best example we've got of that is actually Kel's meet and greet.
Yeah, the meet and greet.
So the meet and greet, when Kel goes, I'm going to a meet and greet. And they make a pun about how it's meet M-E-A-T and meet M-E-E-T. Okay, so it's a quick one, but there's a pun in there. Okay, so they're both of those, oopsie, Bottom, Midsummer Night's Dream, and Kath and Kim. Okay, so we're not properly filling this out because you guys are going to fill it in at a later point, but we're trying to see if it's in both, okay? And so we have another one beginning with D.
Dramatic irony.
Yes, dramatic irony. So have a think.
Kath. Kim.
Okay, that's interesting. So why Kim? Why does Kim as a character represent dramatic irony?
She doesn't realise how kind of ridiculous and over the top and overconfident that she is.
Yes.
And we kind of see her as someone who almost isn't to be taken seriously, but she thinks that the storyline really revolves around her.
She does, yes. That's such a good point. And that's actually tying into the technique I've kept for secret, which is characterization. Okay, so characterization, do we remember what that is?
Just the techniques that are used to elucidate or describe characters.
Awesome. You guys are totally on the ball. Okay, so we're connecting dramatic irony, what we know that the audience, what we know that the characters don't, with characterization. So Kim is characterized by the creators and the composers of Kath and Kim as over the top, ridiculous, overconfident to the point of hilarity. Okay, that is her characterization. And the dramatic irony that is also in play and creating humor here is what?
Dramatic irony?
yeah. It's dramatic irony, but what is it doing?
Oh, it's making you laugh. It's funny.
Yeah, so it is making us laugh because we are aware of how ridiculous she is and how over the top Kim is as a character, but she's not aware. She has no self-awareness of that. And there's humour in that disconnect. Okay, there's humour in that dramatic irony. So we've got two techniques that are working together here to create humour. And do we think that using dramatic irony and characterization in this way, do we think that it draws us closer into the text or further away?
Closer.
Closer. Okay? It's a use of humour to bring us closer into the text. Okay, so dramatic irony, definitely Kath and Kim. And dramatic irony and characterization.
Well, yeah, bottom's the same.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. We're going to get to that in 1 second because that is exactly right. Okay, so...
Well, bottom's the same because he's kind of ridiculous and lazy, but he thinks that he's kind of the smartest and the best going around.
Exactly, okay? So now we can see how comparing two texts can help us understand each one individually. That's what we're doing. That's what we want you to do in your assessment coming up. We want you to identify the common features and the uncommon features. Okay, what is the same for both and isolated to one? Okay, but here we're seeing that there are a lot of things that are in Kath and Kim and A Midsummer Night's Dream. So bottom, Tom has identified that bottom is just like Kim. Okay, he uses malapropisms all the time. Kim uses malapropisms all the time. She is overconfident, thinks that she is the person in charge of the situation and the smartest person in the room when she's never that. And bottom, as a character in A Midsummer Night's Dream, thinks he's the smartest of all the rude mechanicals. Okay, thinks he is the person that should do all of the parts. Okay, we remember he was talking about reading and doing each part. And we have a situation where one character, bottom, is very, very similar to a character in Kath and Kim, and it helps us understand them both. And the use of humour is the same. Okay, so let's have a think now, just a very quick think, because I know that there are some of you who like to think about, the more, you like those challenging questions. So I'm going to pose them to you. So we know what the Shakespearean fool is, yes? Yep. Good, we've covered that. I think that was last term. Shakespearean fool. Okay, is bottom the same as the Shakespearean fool?
No.
No. Why, Tom?
Because rather than he doesn't deliver the punchline, in the sense he doesn't reveal the punchline as a third person voice, he kind of is the punchline.
Exactly. Did we all get that? Bottom is the punchline. He doesn't deliver it. Okay, so the Shakespearean fool stands outside of the world of the story, something beginning with D. We talked about a word that means the world of the story. Do we remember what that is? Ah, so close, diegesis. Okay, the diegesis, the fool, while still within the diegesis of the story, is standing away from everyone else. So he is watching and commentating on what's happening in the story. Okay, he is as far towards, and this is some complex stuff, but you guys have got this. He is as far towards the edge of the diegesis as you can possibly be, because the fool stands way back and comments on what's happening, on what's silly and what's ridiculous, and he gives insights that no other character can give. Okay, that's what the fool does. And we're asking ourselves, just because bottom is silly and makes lots of comments, does that make him the fool or the comic relief?
No.
No, because as Thomas said, he is the punchline. Yeah. Okay, he's within the story. So he may at first seem like, as the funniest character in the story, oh, he's the fool. No, he's not. He is part of the joke. He's not commenting. So we've talked a lot about the more core conceptual understanding that we want you to take when it comes to talking about your humorous techniques. Okay, we don't want you to just say, it's funny. We want you to explain why certain techniques are used in A Midsummer Night's Dream. What was the effect they had? What's the greater purpose? Okay, we want you to be talking about, if you're choosing to talk in your essays. So I know we've covered your upcoming assessment, but when we're talking about your HSC answers, if you choose to talk about humour in A Midsummer Night's Dream, you have to take it to those deeper levels of analysis. That's what the markers are looking for. They're looking for people who can explain your greater purpose behind the humour, people who can employ an explanation of the differences between the humour of the Fool and the humour of Bottom and how they're different. Someone who can explain reader positioning, okay? And how humour plays into that. That's the deeper analysis that we want to see in your assessments. Okay, so you guys have done so well today. Really, really good job. Next lesson, we'll be going even more into kind of understanding Bottom and the Rude Mechanicals as characters, why they're there, what demographic of the audience were they speaking to, that kind of thing. So next lesson, we'll be learning more about specifically the Rude Mechanicals and Bottom and the role that they play in the text. And I will be putting this, I'll be putting this up on Google Classroom, this Venn diagram. And what I want you to do is watch that clip and a couple more. I'm not condoning kind of watching those illegal clips all the time, but just watch a couple. You know, for educational purposes, I know that there is some flexibility for that. So watch those, find humorous techniques that are exclusive to Kath and Kim and put them in here. Then I want you to find humorous techniques that are exclusive to your text and put them in here. Okay, I want you to use your numeracy skills and finish off some English homework for me. And that is going to prepare you for your assessment. That's very similar to this, which is going to come next week. So, I'll pop this up. I want this done before next lesson.
Mm-hmm.
You all good with that?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, you guys have done so well today. All right, really, really good job. We've had some fantastic insights. Okay, as always, very impressed. Okay, and that's the bell. All right, have a good time, guys.